After God knows how long, I was finally able to get my hands on an Xbox Series X, but while I do love the console, one thing it's made abundantly clear to me is that graphics really do matter less now than ever before, which is why I don't think the Switch really needs an upgrade anytime soon, whether that be through a slightly enhanced newer model, or a brand new successor altogether, and if you give me like however long the video says, I'll explain why. Okay, so I know that suggesting Nintendo doesn't need a graphical upgrade with their hardware is gonna automatically get me labeled as a Nintendo fan man, but I'm not saying that I wouldn't love a Switch Pro or Switch 2 or anything like that. I'm just saying that we don't really need one right now is all. The most common argument I hear against this statement is that all the biggest third-party games could never run on the Switch without a considerable amount of extra work from the developers and sacrifices in the quality, and yeah, that's absolutely true for all the major titles, but I mean, nobody buys Nintendo consoles for the third-party games, they mainly buy them to play the first-party exclusives. Yeah, third-party games are really important, but like, the Switch does in fact have plenty of notable third-party games from reputable developers, just not all of them is all. I mean, sure, it'd be cool to have portable versions of the newest Resident Evil titles and Call of Duties and all that, but I mean, if you're taking a look at most of the games that have been coming out these days, some of the most popular games aren't even all that graphically impressive if you think about it. Fortnite, Rocket League, Minecraft, Overwatch, Among Us, and Popeye all run on the Switch just fine. Not as easily as PlayStation or Xbox, but still completely fine. Then of course there's all those first-party games that people actually are buying the Switch for in the first place. As much as some will claim that the Switch is doomed because it doesn't have Elden Ring, everybody and their step peppers are going to line up at Funko Land as soon as the newest Zelda game comes out, and plenty of those people are probably going to end up buying a new console. I mean, people were saying that the Game Boy was outdated and underpowered in 1996, but then Pokemon came out and it started selling out the ass, because while graphics may be nice, at the end of the day, if a console has fun games in, it'll be just fine. The fact is that Nintendo's got plenty of games in the pipeline that enough people feel like they have to own to keep the Switch's sales strong, and despite the graphical limitations, games like Breath of the Wild on the Switch are still outstanding. Now, would it be better with more juice? Of course it would, but if you copy and pasted games like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, or Smash Ultimate to PlayStation as they were with no modifications, then nobody would call them underpowered or unimpressive, because they're just plain good games, and at the end of the day, that's really all 99% of people want. When the Series X and PS5 first came out, I swore that I'd never pay more than a penny over retail for them, nor would I ever even wake up slightly early to go out of my way to get one either. I told myself I was going to be patient until I could just walk into any store anytime I want, or whenever I just happen to come across one, and sure enough, 2 years later, that's exactly what happened when I managed to get my hands on a Series X. I've never really played Xbox in the past outside of this brief period where I owned a 360, but I must say that I think this is a really neat piece of machinery here.
Heavy as hell, but that's a good thing.
If nothing else, you gotta admit it's packaged with the greatest presentation of all time. I mean, look at this. I felt like somebody personally wrapped this for me as a Christmas gift. I mean, I know that it was probably manufactured by a machine in a factory, but it still felt special to me, damn it. But anyway, as much as I do enjoy the new hardware, though, it didn't take me very long to realize that I haven't missed one goddamn thing in the years it took me to finally get a hold of it. I literally went out of my way to specifically search for a game that actually utilizes the Series X's power, but I couldn't find doodly squat years into the console's lifecycle outside of this random-ass flight simulator game. So do you want to know what games I've been playing after spending $500 on a new console? Shredder's Revenge, which I could have just played on my Switch or PS4 for that matter, Rare Replay for a few minutes out of curiosity, which I could have just played on various other consoles that are decades old, and Halo 1 that I could just play on an original Xbox. Sounds kinda sad, but I mean, I knew it'd be a while before games were actually allowed to take advantage of the hardware, and honestly, the games I've been playing all look great to me regardless, because they either have stylized graphics that don't rely on power, or the games came out after the everything looks fine milestone was reached. I know plenty of you are probably gonna say, oh, you should play Red Dead Redemption 2 or Elden Ring, but like, I already said I have a PS4, you bimbo, and all those games look exactly the same as they would on the Series X. Sure, there'd be a considerable dip in quality if you ported titles like these to the Switch, but to claim that the console's dead for not having them, it'd be like calling the PS5 dead for not having Smash, Mario Odyssey, Batwa, Splatoon, and yeah, you get it. As long as the Switch has got games that people feel like they need, the console's not gonna run out of gas anytime soon, regardless of how undeniable it may be that the hardware is outdated. And the best proof of this would be that the Steam Deck did in fact not kill the Switch like so many people predicted it would. And look, I'm not even remotely dissing the Steam Deck here at all, but if the Switch's outdated power not being strong enough to support the biggest AAA games really was as big of a flaw as people say, then the Steam Deck should have at least slowed the Switch's momentum down, but sure enough, it's still trucking along just fine, and the reason for that's because these two portables cater to two completely different markets. Again though, I'd love it if Nintendo released a successor so I could have a few extra options of games to play on the turlet and for them to look better, but it's not as big of a necessity as some people think. Personally, I think graphics reached the everything looks fine milestone back in the 7th generation with the PS3 and 360 to where developers could pretty much make any kind of game they wanted then as they can now, even though modern games obviously do look better. I mean, Pikmin 1 and 2 could not run on the 64, and Sonic the Hedgehog is far less unique on the Master System as it was on the Genesis, so the new hardware at the time was definitely necessary. These days, there's tons of games that don't rely on power, and it's not even crazy for a 3DS game like Resident Evil Revelations to get a home console port without significant changes. So oddly enough, I actually do think the Switch could last for a full decade like Nintendo originally hoped for, which I did not think would initially be the case, but since graphics aren't really the driving factor for like 75% of games you see these days, I kinda like the idea that you don't need to get the newest console on day one if you don't want to just be stuck with the trash versions. Having Tony Hawk 3 on the 64 or PS1 back in the day would be the equivalent of being caught with a Dr. Good Guy in your fridge, but that's not really the case anymore, which means that all these people overspending on scalped consoles are kind of, well, you could argue that console makers should hold off on releasing new hardware until there's actually games that could utilize the extra power, but I kinda think it's nicer we're getting more out of our investments, if I'm being honest. As far as Nintendo's concerned though, I feel pretty strongly that they should stick to the whole hybrid deal, which means that they'll probably always be underpowered compared to the rival consoles, and honestly, I think it's been proven that most of us are okay with this. Sure, Nintendo could release a successor to the Switch right now, but it'd either still be underpowered compared to the Series X or PS5, or it'd be super expensive and still not quite as strong anyway, and probably heavy as hell, which, unlike for a home console, is actually not a good thing. Given that Nintendo put the Switch out in the middle of a console generation, I think it makes sense for them to get as much mileage out of it as possible, and to put the successor out no earlier than the middle of the 9th generation. The longer we wait for new Nintendo hardware, the stronger it'll be for the exclusive games that utilize the extra power, but I won't even care if they do the same deal as the PS5 and Series X, where most games just kinda look the same on both platforms for about a year or two so nobody feels left out, but make the successor pretty much the same thing as the Switch without rocking the boat too hard. And by that I basically mean just make it a hybrid again. All you gotta do is give Super Switch exclusives unique box art so that random dads won't get confused and give little Jimmy a game he can't even play on his OG model. Seeing how there's over 100 million base Switches sold though, there's no real reason to put like 80% of the exclusives on the successor's model if they're not even gonna utilize the extra power. Man, I know Nintendo does dumb things sometimes, but surely the Switch's successor is gonna be backwards compatible with the OG Switch games, you know? If there's gonna keep being a good chunk of games that aren't trying to look hyper-realistic then, it just makes sense to keep releasing them for the OG model if the hardware can run it. Given that most modern games can still run on the Switch, then there's no real hurry for an upgrade, so as long as Nintendo keeps some bangers coming for the next few years, then I wouldn't mind waiting a little bit longer so the inevitable successor can be as good as possible. Besides, given how Nintendo gave up on the Wii U after like 20 minutes, I kinda think they need to make the Switch last a little while longer to make up for it. Anyway, that's all for today, but if you got a kick out of my incoherent rambling and disturbing imagery though, then you should check out this video I made on the most graphically demanding Switch game of all time, Popeye, but if you'll excuse me though, I gotta go frame my stepdad for larceny. Later!